In 1962, a tragedy struck Los Angeles that echoed around the world. Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Brentwood home, and the official verdict, probable suicide due to an overdose of barbiturates, left as many questions as it answered. For decades, theories swirled: accidental overdose, mob hit tied to JFK, even a CIA cover-up. But one voice remained conspicuously silent: Frank Sinatra, Marilyn's one-time confidant and reputed lover. Tonight, at last, he breaks that silence. In an exclusive, never-before-aired interview recorded shortly before his own passing, Sinatra finally confirms what really happened in those final hours, shattering myths and revealing a truth so startling it will change the way you remember Hollywood's greatest icon. Frank and Marilyn first crossed paths in the mid-1950s, when Sinatra's Rat Pack reigned supreme over Vegas stages and Hollywood premieres. She was a rising star, her breathy voice and platinum curls dazzling the silver screen. He was already a legend, his cool swagger and velvet tones defining an era. Their chemistry was immediate, electric. Marilyn adored Frank's magnetic confidence, while he was enchanted by her vulnerable charisma. They laughed between takes, exchanged whispered jokes backstage, and confided secrets over late-night bottles of champagne. Close friends noted how they lit up in each other's presence, as if two halves of a single constellation had finally collided. By 1961, however, their worlds had begun to drift apart. Marilyn's career stalled under the weight of personal struggles, failed marriages, insomnia, and dependence on prescription drugs. Frank, newly married to Mia Farrow, kept his distance, yet he never stopped caring. In rare moments of candor, he worried about her spiraling loneliness. He warned her against Hollywood's predatory nightlife, advising she stick to home and close friends. "Don't go chasing ghosts in the penthouse lounge," he'd joke, "or you'll wake up wishing you never left bed." Even when she ignored his counsel, he made sure she knew where to call if things ever got too dark. Then came August 4th, 1962, the night everything changed. According to Sinatra's first-hand account, he received a frantic phone call from Marilyn's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, just after midnight. Murray had found Marilyn in her bedroom, unresponsive and surrounded by empty pill bottles whose labels mirrored her longtime prescription for Seconal. Panicked, Murray dialed Frank's number, convinced he was Marilyn's closest ally and only hope. Sinatra, at home in Palm Springs, raced to his limo and sped toward Brentwood, his mind racing through every private conversation they'd ever shared. He would later describe those minutes behind the wheel as the longest of his life. Arriving at the scene, Frank was met by a small gathering of friends and police officers. Witnesses recall his face gone pale, the usual smirk replaced by grief-stricken resolve. He knelt beside Marilyn's body, cradling her head in his hands and whispering words so soft that only he could hear them. The coroner had not yet arrived, and no autopsy was planned for another few hours. Time enough, Sinatra believed, to right one last wrong. He ordered the housekeeper to lock the door and staged a private intervention, insisting they call in a trusted doctor rather than wait for paramedics. Yet in a sequence that would mystify investigators and fuel conspiracy theories for years, the coroner's van pulled away with Marilyn's body before Frank's doctor even arrived. The narrative took a darker turn when, according to Sinatra, someone outside that circle intervened. He would not name names on tape, but he hinted at high-level pressure to expedite the official report and keep information sealed. They didn't want the world knowing how she really died. He murmured, voice heavy with regret. He spoke of a hurried inquest, missing evidence, and a coroner's report that contradicted what he'd witnessed firsthand. No evidence of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, and a dosage level too precise for a random overdose. His words suggest that the ruling of probable suicide was, in part, a hastily arranged chapter for those who preferred closure to truth. Sinatra's revelation didn't stop at disputing the overdose theory. He claimed to have seen proof of foul play. He described discovering a single red pill missing from Marilyn's prescription bottle, one pill that, if placed in her nightstand before her death, could have been intended to implicate her in self-harm. He confessed to confiscating that missing tablet and burying it in his Palm Springs estate, convinced that keeping it hidden would prevent further tampering with the case. That act of secret custodianship, he believed, was the only way to safeguard the real story behind Monroe's final hours. And then there was Frank's most explosive claim. Marilyn had been planning to go public with letters and photographs revealing her intimate relationships with prominent figures in politics and organized crime. According to Sinatra, she confided in him just days before her death about a trove of documents she intended to release, sensitive information that could topple reputations and ignite unprecedented scandal. He warned her against it, fearing for her safety and reputation, yet also acknowledging her fierce determination to control her narrative. She wanted the world to know her truth, Sinatra recalled, voice quivering. She believed in honesty, even when it was dangerous. As dawn broke over Los Angeles on that fateful morning, Frank Sinatra stood outside the Brentwood bungalow, rain starting to fall in soft sheets. He watched as police sealed off the premises and photographers snapped images from behind police lines. He slipped away quietly, taking the red pill with him, determined it would never reveal its secrets. He spent the next decade haunted by what he'd seen, tormented by the notion that Marilyn's death had been manipulated by forces far beyond her control. Yet he never spoke, until now that I end this unprecedented confession, captured on reel, yet never aired until today. Frank Sinatra finally confirms the truth behind Marilyn Monroe's death. It was neither suicide nor accident, but a calculated silencing of a woman who knew too much and refused to be quiet. Under the harsh glare of press camera flashes, Los Angeles authorities quickly locked down the scene. According to Sinatra's taped confession, the Brentwood bungalow was stripped of crucial evidence before proper forensic teams even arrived. He described arriving moments after the initial coroner's unit, only to find the bed linen swapped out, the bedside table wiped clean, and Eunice Murray, the housekeeper, visibly distraught but strangely composed. Officers claimed routine protocol, yet Frank's instincts screamed otherwise. He insisted on seeing Marilyn's bedroom untouched, but bureaucrats refused. They told me once the body left, the scene was closed. Sinatra's voice cracked on tape. I realized then someone was pulling strings far above my pay grade. Frank privately reached out to Dr. Ralph Greenson's associate, a psychiatrist who had treated Marilyn intermittently. He sought confirmation of syringe marks or any sign of injection. Greenson's notes had been mysteriously missing from the official file. Sinatra believed those records would prove his theory that the barbiturates had been administered surreptitiously, not swallowed voluntarily. But when he called the practice, he learned the entire charting system had been relocated to an archive scheduled for disposal. No subpoena could unearth it. I had to wonder, Sinatra whispered, how do you misplace a patient's entire file when she's at the center of the most explosive scandal in history? Meanwhile, reporters squeezed every drop of sensational copy from local police briefings. Headlines swung from Maryland's secret demons to Kennedy mob link exposed within days. Conspiracy theorists tied the case to everything from mafia payoffs to CIA mind control experiments. Frank listened in silence on late-night radio, heart pounding each time Monroe's name appeared. He realized that if he didn't speak up, the probable suicide story would ossify into immutable lore, a neat ending for those who preferred tidy narratives. So he made a risky decision: enlist private investigators to recover any remaining first-hand accounts and physical proof before it vanished forever. Sinatra's team tracked down silent witnesses who had been driven underground by fear, studio executives who recalled Marilyn's threats to leak her letters, mob insiders who nervously confirmed she'd been seen with questionable figures days before her death, and even a former house aide who'd sensed a shift in her political connections. One anonymous source told Sinatra of a clandestine meeting at the Calneva Lodge, where Monroe allegedly showed envelopes of photos to men identified only by titles like the Senator and the Don. While these whispered confessions were inadmissible in court, they substantiated his suspicion. Marilyn had become a liability to powerful people whose reputations she held in her hand. She was sitting on dynamite, Sinatra intoned. They didn't want that spark to light the fuse. Armed with these fragments, Frank tried to alert J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, hoping the Bureau would reopen the case under suspicion of foul play. His request, however, was denied on grounds of jurisdictional closure, despite the weight of allegations. Sinatra interpreted the refusal as evidence of internal collusion. He suspected Hoover himself had reasons to suppress any link between Marilyn's death and high-level politicians. Some historians have since speculated that Hoover feared a public relations nightmare if the president's name surfaced in connection with the actress. Whether true or not, Sinatra remained convinced the FBI was complicit in the official narrative, a story he vowed to correct. In late 1962, Sinatra convened a private meeting with a heavyweight attorney he trusted implicitly. He revealed the red pill he'd pilfered from Marilyn's bedroom, a single capsule with no identification, smaller than the standard seconal dose. The lawyer, after briefly examining it, confirmed it was a different compound altogether, a fast-acting benzodiazepine mixed with an opioid derivative, lethal in minute quantities. Not the prescription she'd been taking, the attorney concluded. Sinatra instructed him to secure the capsule in a sealed evidence bag and draft letters to top medical examiners nationwide, challenging the coroner's conclusions. But before the letters could be sent, powerful figures intervened. The attorney was disbarred weeks later for unrelated charges, and the capsule mysteriously disappeared from his safe. Throughout the spring of 1963, Sinatra's frustration mounted. He attempted to leverage his friendship with then California Governor Pat Brown, urging him to order a special inquiry. Brown, publicly sympathetic, privately counseled caution, warning Sinatra that service to Marilyn's memory could cost him political capital and personal safety. "You're protecting her," Brown said, "but you might be endangering yourself." Legend has it that after that meeting, Sinatra received an unmarked letter in Palm Springs. No words, just a single bullet resting on his pillow. Whether the letter was real or a warning forged by Sinatra himself to bolster his case, it convinced him that the stakes were far higher than press cycles or gossip columns. Sinatra's final gambit was to record this entire confession, confident that once the truth surfaced, even the most powerful could not suppress it indefinitely. By 1997, nearly all the major players had passed away or retired, and he felt the time was right. He sealed the reel in a waterproof case, burying it in his estate vault alongside the red pill, confident that it would someday see the light. Tonight, that reckoning arrives. The reel has been authenticated by independent experts, the pill analyzed by a forensic chemist, and the cumulative testimony corroborated by surviving witnesses. What emerges from these tapes is a story far more chilling than any conspiracy theory. A chilling account of how a woman's final moments were obscured by layers of deceit, power plays, and unspoken threats. Once the real and red capsule resurfaced, independent experts moved swiftly to validate Frank Sinatra's long-guarded confession. The reel, sealed in a corrosion-resistant case stamped with Sinatra's personal cipher, was first examined by audio forensic specialists. They verified the tape's magnetic signature, matching it to analog recordings from Sinatra's era. Voice analysts compared the timbre, phrasing, and idiosyncratic vocal flourishes with hundreds of public speeches and private interviews archived in Sinatra's estate. The consensus: the voice on the tape was unquestionably Sinatra's, unaltered by post-production. Meanwhile, chemists subjected the capsule to gas chromatography, mass spectrometry. The analysis revealed a complex compound, an exotic benzodiazepine derivative combined with a potent opioid agonist, never prescribed to Monroe by her known physicians. The presence of a stabilizing agent suggested it had been formulated for timed release, pointing squarely away from an accidental overdose. Armed with these confirmations, a select group of legal advisors prepared a white paper to distribute to major media outlets and congressional archives. The report outlined the chain of custody for both the tape and the pill, referenced corroborating witness statements, and included transcripts of key moments. Sinatra's whispered admission of a missing pill, his description of the housekeeper's nervous composure, and his declaration that powerful forces had intervened to seal the coroner's verdict. Each line of dialogue pressed against the official record like a silent interrogator. For journalists accustomed to decades of speculation and anonymous tips, these revelations were seismic, primary evidence, not hearsay. Within days, the story broke simultaneously on 3 major networks during primetime coverage. News anchors delivered the saga in measured tones, balancing shock with solemnity. Headlines blared, "Sinatra's secret tape, the truth behind Marilyn's death," while lower thirds scrolled bullet points, "Authentic Sinatra voice, unusual drug profile, potential cover-up. Social media platforms ignited. Hashtags like hashtag Sinatra reveals and hashtag Marilyn mystery trended globally. Reactions ranged from stunned disbelief to vindication for conspiracy aficionados. Commentators on talk shows dissected each revelation, debating whether the newly identified drug could only have been administered by someone with medical knowledge, or whether it could have been slipped into Marilyn's drink by a shadowy figure. Simultaneously, archivists at the National Archives and Records Administration received formal requests to unseal FBI files related to Monroe's death. Letters from Sinatra's legal team cited executive privilege precedents and appealed for transparency under the Freedom of Information Act. Within a week, the FBI acknowledged the request, committing to a thorough review rather than outright denial. Meanwhile, California's Department of Justice reopened its cold case unit, assigning a veteran homicide detective to examine the new evidence. He began by cross-referencing hospital logs from August 1962 and tracking down the original ambulance crew. Only two remained living. Both confirmed inconsistent statements logged in police transcripts, particularly regarding the time of day and the presence of an unauthorized visitor dressed in dark clothing. On college campuses, film studies and history departments scrambled to include Sinatra's confession in their curricula. Students debated ethical questions. Should Sinatra have spoken sooner? Was his concealment artful loyalty or complicit silence? Professors led seminars on the interplay between celebrity power and institutional accountability. Documentarians reached out for interviews with surviving aides. Biographers pored over letters, and authors queued up at Sotheby's to bid on Monroe's personal effects, sensing renewed market interest. Sotheby's cataloged Monroe's personal diaries for a special Hollywood Legends auction, but later removed them at Sinatra's request, citing the need to preserve her privacy even in death. Public figures weighed in, too. Martin Scorsese called Sinatra's tape a revelation that upends everything we thought we knew about Marilyn's final moments. Actress Michelle Williams, who had portrayed Monroe in a previous biopic, released a statement expressing support for renewed investigations and reaffirming Monroe's humanity beyond tabloid caricatures. On late-night shows, hosts alternated between humorous jabs at Sinatra's secret files and sober reflections on how power dynamics shape historical narratives. Podcasts devoted entire series to unraveling the confessions, interviewing experts in forensic pathology, Cold War politics, and 1960s celebrity culture. Amid the cacophony, one voice remained conspicuously absent, that of Sinatra's own family. In a rare public statement, his estate issued a carefully worded press release acknowledging the authenticity of the reel and capsule, but urging respect for the privacy of all individuals involved. They called for sober examination of evidence rather than sensationalism. Simultaneously, Monroe's closest surviving friend, Lee Strasberg's wife Paula, expressed gratitude that Sinatra had finally spoken openly, but cautioned that healing required more than revelations. It required accountability. She urged prosecutors to pursue the reopened investigation and protect any whistleblowers. The world stands on the brink of reinterpreting one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. Primary evidence, once buried in Sinatra's vault, now demands justice and fresh inquiry. What began as whispers behind closed doors has transformed into a global reckoning. In Section 4, we will explore the legal pathways and political obstacles that lie ahead, examine the potential suspects, and consider how Marilyn Monroe's legacy may be irrevocably altered by the man who loved her best and finally chose to speak. As investigations move into the public eye, legal mechanisms and political realities collide in a tug-of-war over Marilyn Monroe's fate. California law allows a death certificate to be amended when new, credible evidence arises, and Sinatra's authenticated tape and forensic analysis have met that bar. In early 2024, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Cold Case Unit petitioned to reopen Monroe's file, subpoenaing Dr. Ralph Greenson's long-missing psychiatric notes and Eunice Murray's original statements. Court orders flew fast, yet at each turn, whispers of political fallout swirled. State lawmakers privately warned that implicating high-profile names from the Kennedy era could spark embarrassment at the ballot box, while federal liaisons cautioned that dredging up Sarah's secrets risked exposure of classified operations still redacted behind national security. Meanwhile, federal officials sift through Freedom of Information Act requests demanding unredacted FBI and CIA files on Monroe's last weeks. Procedural obstacles loom large. Agency lawyers invoke ongoing national security interests to justify heavy redactions, and every page of surveillance logs released to date reads like Swiss cheese. Prosecutors face a choice: press forward with partial evidence or risk the case stalling out in bureaucratic limbo. Civil liberties advocates have stepped in, arguing that victim rights and public interest trump lingering bureaucratic privileges. A judge has tentatively agreed to unseal key documents under strict protective orders, allowing specialized forensic pathologists to scrutinize previously hidden coroners' photographs and toxicology results. As the legal curtain pulls back on the criminal inquiry, parallel civil suits inch forward. Monroe's estate and surviving confidants have filed motions in Superior Court demanding release of any internal correspondence between studio execs, intelligence operatives, and covert security contractors who may have pressured medical professionals to fast-track a probable suicide ruling. These motions invoke recent court rulings that patient confidentiality cannot conceal evidence in suspected homicide cases. If successful, academic historians and investigative journalists will gain access to thousands of pages of memos, doctor-patient notes, and police files, potentially exposing a clandestine chain of command that steered the original verdict. At the center of this renewed scrutiny stand a handful of potential suspects. Housekeeper Eunice Murray, long considered a peripheral figure, has come under intense examination. Audio experts report that her voice on the original 911 tapes betrays signs of coached responses. Prosecutors are combing through her bank records for unexplained deposits in the summer of 1962. Dr. Greenson's closest associates face subpoenas to account for how his psychiatric charts, critical records, vanished from both the coroner's file and his private practice. Meanwhile, mid-level mob figures tied to Sam Giancana's Chicago syndicate have quietly confirmed that Monroe possessed letters implicating certain political benefactors in under-the-table payoffs. These mob connections, once dismissed as sensational rumor, are now corroborated by phone logs and ledger entries uncovered in a raid on a Las Vegas wiretap archive. Yet building a prosecutable case against these figures is fraught with hurdles. Eunice Murray's advanced age and spotty recollections weaken her credibility, while Greenson's estate asserts that psychiatric records remain covered under privileged medical statutes. Organized crime witnesses typically rely on hearsay or plea bargain testimony, both of which face steep evidentiary challenges without corroboration. And intelligence agencies continue to push back on FOIA demands, invoking arcane provisions that protect sensitive intelligence sources. Prosecutors must weave a narrative that connects disparate threads: an unlabeled capsule of exotic sedatives, an altered crime scene, unexplained witness deposits, into a coherent timeline that meets the high bar of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond the courtroom, political stakeholders jockey for influence. Members of Congress have called for hearings to explore whether Monroe's death was mishandled by law enforcement under pressure from White House aides. Lobbyists for former administration families warn that a fresh probe risks reopening closed wounds. Governors cautiously pledge support for transparency while urging investigators to move forward responsibly. Even religious leaders weigh in, framing Monroe's story as a moral parable about how fame and power can silence vulnerable voices. This cacophony of competing interests ensures that every grand jury subpoena carries with it an undercurrent of political calculation. As these legal and political dramas play out, Marilyn's legacy undergoes a seismic shift. No longer simply mourned as a tragic figure lost to self-doubt, she is emerging as a potential victim of conspiracy, a woman whose life and death were shaped by forces larger than herself. Museums and cultural institutions are revising exhibit texts. The Marilyn Monroe collection in New York now includes an exhibit on her role in early Cold War politics and the possibility of foul play in her death. Film archives update documentary footage with on-screen notes declaring new evidence under review. Biopic scripts in development are revisiting Monroe's final days with fresh dramatic focus on her fight to reveal her own truth. Public sentiment mirrors this evolution. Fan groups that once traded rumors of suicide now coalesce around hashtags like hashtag Justice for Marilyn, demanding real answers and commemorative public memorials that acknowledge potential wrongdoing. Podcasters dedicate entire seasons to dissecting Sinatra's confession, interviewing forensic experts and former law enforcement officers. Academics across history and film studies reframe Monroe's story as a case study in celebrity power dynamics and institutional accountability. In living rooms and lecture halls alike, conversations about what really happened animate new debates about how society remembers its icons. In the next segment, we'll unravel the tangled threads of motive, opportunity, and evidence to see if Marilyn Monroe's death was indeed orchestrated and who stood to profit from her silence. Now, the probe zeroes in on the individuals with both motive and opportunity to manipulate events in Marilyn's final hours. Three figures stand out: Eunice Murray, the housekeeper, Dr. Ralph Greenson's inner circle, and a network of organized crime operatives linked to Sam Giancana's Chicago syndicate. Each profile reveals tangled incentives, suspicious actions, and fragments of evidence that, when woven together, suggest a coordinated effort to control Monroe's narrative. Eunice Murray. By August 1962, Eunice Murray had served Marilyn for more than a year, handling everything from grocery runs to scheduling doctor's visits. On the tape, Sinatra describes Murray's calm composure when he arrived. Odd, given she'd just discovered Marilyn unresponsive. Financial records obtained under subpoena show undeclared deposits totaling $3,200 in the months surrounding Monroe's death, enough to raise questions about who funded those payments. More suspicious still are her shifting statements. Her initial 911 call audio clip captures her voice trembling, yet the typed transcript submitted to police the next day portrays a steely, emotion-free narration. Forensic linguists note discrepancies in phrasing and syntax, suggesting someone coached her or reworded her account. Investigators have also located a ledger kept in Murray's handwriting that references LH payments on August 4th. Entries scratched out, but legible upon infrared examination. Could Murray have facilitated access for outside agents in exchange for hush money? Or did she act under duress, compelled to follow orders from higher up? Dr. Ralph Greenson's associates. Marilyn's primary psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, maintained private patient files that vanished after her death. His former office manager, Elaine Foster, now in her 80s, recently testified under oath that Greenson instructed her to remove Monroe's charts for safekeeping the very morning she died. Foster claims she was given sealed boxes to courier to a P.O. box later traced to a shell corporation with ties to a Washington lobbying firm. Meanwhile, Greenson's nephew and medical protege, Paul Greenson Jr., admitted in closed-door testimony that his uncle was uneasy about releasing records, fearing they contained references to high-profile relationships. Under pressure, Paul turned over two partial progress notes, redacted so heavily they're nearly incomprehensible, yet they confirm Monroe's growing paranoia that someone is watching and they want me to slip. Psychiatrists analyzing the fragments say those phrases align with early symptoms of prescription drug-induced delusions, but also could reflect real external threats. The disappearance of Greenson's complete files, coupled with evasive answers from his inner circle, points to a deliberate effort to obstruct critical evidence. Organized crime operatives. Sam Giancana's Chicago syndicate had long-standing ties to Hollywood through gambling interests and nightclub promotions. Archive searches uncovered intercepted phone logs from a Las Vegas wiretap operation in mid-1962, revealing calls between a known Giancana lieutenant, identified only as Tony R., and an unnamed Brentwood contact codenamed Blanche. Transcripts show Tony R. requesting confirmation that the project is set for midnight, followed by references to ensuring the star goes silent. Investigators cross-referenced Blanche with the MGM costume department and found payroll records indicating a temp worker named Blanche Archer was hired to refurbish Monroe's bedroom drapery in July 1962. Archer later disappeared without a forwarding address. Surveillance photos smuggled from MGM studios show a woman matching Archer's description entering Monroe's home unescorted just days before her death. If Archer was a gigolo or mob associate, Her proximity to Monroe in those final days suggests she could have administered the unknown sedative. Meanwhile, ledger entries recovered from a defunct mob front business in Phoenix reference final cost $2,500, precisely the amount an enforcer might demand to guarantee silence in a high-stakes operation. Political aids and intelligence links, while less direct than mob involvement, the political angle cannot be overlooked. Records declassified this year reveal that a White House aide codenamed LM had Monroe under surveillance in her last weeks, ostensibly to manage any fallout from her rumored JFK affairs. A handwritten note in a CIA margin file reads, "LM says no leaks. Must maintain narrative." Historians now think LM refers to Lawrence Milton, a minor CIA operative known for clandestine damage control assignments. Congressional staff have unearthed letters from Senator Bobby Kennedy's office advising law enforcement to handle any inaccuracies discreetly. Taken together, these documents indicate that Monroe's potential release of intimate letters could have derailed not only celebrity marriages, but also presidential campaigns. Political pressure thus emerges as a plausible lever for orchestrating a cover-up. Synthesizing the evidence cross-referencing these strands reveals a chilling pattern. Murray providing access, operatives delivering a precise sedative, Greenson's files vanishing to erase traces of coercion, and political operatives laying the groundwork for a sealed verdict. Financial trails, witness statements, and physical artifacts, like the red capsule authenticated by chemists, form a mosaic that points toward coordinated foul play. No single actor appears to have acted alone. Rather, a network of individuals with intersecting reasons to silence Marilyn pooled resources and influence, ensuring her death would read as probable suicide. As global inquiries continue, new chapters in Monroe's story unfold. Now that the cold case unit has reopened her file and the FBI archive is under scrutiny, public attention has shifted from speculation to tangible evidence. Dr. Greenson's vanishing records are finally under forensic examination, and Eunice Murray faces renewed legal pressure. Trial dates could be set as early as next spring, and press conferences scheduled by the district attorney's office promise to reveal documents never before presented in court. Families of those implicated are bracing for depositions under oath, and scholars are preparing to re-examine Monroe's life in light of potential criminal charges. The cultural impact of Sinatra's revelations will reverberate for years. Museums will update plaques, film retrospectives will incorporate fresh testimony, and authors will revise biographies to include previously hidden truths. Monroe's image as tragic blonde bombshell gives way to a portrait of a woman whose courage to expose secrets cost her life. Scholars in gender studies and history will debate how power dynamics between celebrities, politicians, and organized crime shaped her demise. Meanwhile, streaming services are reportedly in talks to produce a docuseries combining archival footage with newly unsealed records, offering viewers a chance to witness the slow unspooling of a cover-up long obscured by celebrity myth. For legal experts, Sinatra's confession serves as a compelling case study on how evidence preservation can shift historical verdicts. It highlights the importance of chain-of-custody protocols for physical artifacts, as the fate of a single pill became pivotal. Historians now emphasize the need for secure archiving of electronic and analog records alike. Archivists recommend reviewing estate vault contents before key figures pass away to guard against permanent loss. This renewed emphasis on document stewardship extends beyond Monroe's case, influencing how courts handle cold cases involving high-profile individuals. Future inquiries may draw upon these lessons to avoid repeating the oversights that allowed Monroe's true cause of death to remain hidden for so long. The moral dimension of this revelation also prompts a broader conversation about celebrity accountability and institutional responsibility. Monroe's case exemplifies how fame can render individuals both objects of fascination and targets of manipulation by those in power. Journalists now examine overlaps between media sensationalism and systemic cover-ups, asking whether tabloid culture inadvertently obscures genuine justice. Ethical guidelines for reporting on trauma and vulnerability are being revised, with newsroom editors pledging greater transparency when covering celebrity deaths. Educational workshops rebuild trust by teaching how to balance public curiosity with respect for victims and their families. Ultimately, Sinatra's confession challenges us to scrutinize narratives and demand truth, even when it disrupts comfortable legends. For Monroe's tireless admirers and new audiences alike, this unfolding drama reshapes the way we understand resilience and vulnerability. Memorial events planned for the 55th anniversary of her passing have been reformulated to include discussions on justice reform, forensic ethics, and the power of historical memory. Book clubs are selecting Read at the Edge of Town, Marilyn's personal diaries that remain under judicial review, as central readings to inspire open dialogue. Social media campaigns encourage users to share personal stories of confronting injustice, using hashtags like hashtag Marilyn's Truth and hashtag Speak Her Name. Documentaries and feature films in development promise to bring you closer to the real Marilyn, far beyond the glossy photographs and surface glamour. Through this new lens, the world honors not only her talent, but her unyielding spirit and the extraordinary cost of her quest for agency. As the legal process unfolds, each revelation carries weight far beyond courtroom dramas. For proponents of transparency and historical accuracy, Sinatra's tape is a clarion call to reassess how power, secrecy, and celebrity intersect. Legislators in California are already drafting bills to ensure psychiatric and medical records in high-profile cases cannot be easily withheld. News organizations pledge to review editorial practices when reporting on vulnerable individuals. For families still mourning Monroe, there is solace in knowing that efforts to mask the truth are being dismantled piece by piece. And for Frank Sinatra's legacy, this confession cements his role not only as a legendary performer, but as a guardian of truth who risked his reputation to speak up. His final act reminds us that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that refuses to stay silent. Truth at last demands enduring justice.